What is the most fricked up thing you've seen your parents do? Stepmom purposely falsely accused me twice of stealing from her. First time she told me she was going to do it to get my dad to cut off paying for my college and kick me out. It worked. Second time she accused me of what would have been a felony amount to try to get me thrown in jail. Luckily it didn't work out for her that time. Goddamn. Your stepmom sounds like one of the stepmoms from old Disney movies. Once while my sister and I were upstairs, my parents were fighting really loud downstairs. Suddenly, we hear complete silence. My sis and I came out of our rooms at exactly the same time to go see what was going on. We rushed down the stairs and saw my father choking my mother. She stayed with him for approximately 10 years after that. Oh, and the day after that happened, we all went on a happy vacation, with my mother pretending nothing had happened and instructing us to do the same. My mom threw a whole pizza in the garbage when my brother and I were arguing about it. My little mind dang near exploded. Finally, a comment that isn't dark and is funny. My dad intentionally set his hand on fire to demonstrate that whatever fluid he was using burns with a cold flame. He was normally a very smart, level-headed person, I swear. I caught a lake turtle on my fishing line as a kid. We tried to get the hook out but the unfortunate thing had swallowed it whole. My poor dad couldn't figure out what to do. We tried to kill it with a pellet gun, but it was underpowered and didn't even break the skin. Eventually he sent me inside the house and said he's take care of it. I was bawling and couldn't pull myself away. Saw him pick up a cinder block and smash it to death with 3-4 blows before kicking the remains into the lake. Horrible. I hated him for it at the time. But looking back on it now, as I'm now close to the age he was at the time, I really feel bad for him. I don't know that he had much else of a choice and I'm sure it rattled him just as much as it did me. Went to my aunt's house one day and they told me they had found a turtle recently. Oh cool, wish I could have seen it. Well, I got to see the leftover shell because apparently they made the rest into soup and ate it. Turtles should be careful around country folk. I remember my mom taking me to see her lover and forcing me to wait in the car for hours. When I was maybe 13, my cousin had a baby and my mom went over to my nana's house to wait for the baby with a butcher knife. She was going to stab my cousin's newborn because she thought it was the Antichrist. Your childhood must have been interesting to say the least. I remember them fricking on the kitchen counter behind us while we were having breakfast before school. One year they got a massive tub of chocolate as they were into eating foods off each other, but they hated it. So us kids had chocolate body spread sandwiches for nearly a year. It was a huge tub. When they got into fights it would turn into a throwing match. My mum dented the double glazed window with a frying pan. It is possible, and to this day, at least 15 years later, she still has the pan in question. They'd once redecorated the lounge, and about a week later were so drunk they got into an argument which resulted in my mum throwing her plate of salad at my stepdad, getting mayo and lettuce leaves on the wall, and I vaguely remember it still being stuck to the wall 6 months later. When my stepdad fell asleep on the sofa downstairs, she turned the Bible channel on, or any other religious channel, put the TV on full blast and take the remote to bed with her so he couldn't change it. That's kind of repulsive. My mom held a gun to her head when I was 8, threatening suicide. When I ran over to her, crying, trying to stop her, she pointed the gun right at my forehead and told me to get away. Never been more scared in my life. She also shot a gun off in the house a few weeks later, had several ropes tied into nooses hanging in her closet, wrote several suicide notes, and would basically threaten to end her life whenever something inconvenienced her. Luckily she's sober and much more stable now, but we don't have a good relationship and I'm still terrified of her to this day. That's completely understandable. When I was like 11 I saw them doing drugs in their bedroom. Middle of the day, no consideration for me at all. It scared me half to death because they both got zombie-like on whatever it was. When I was a little kid, probably around 10, my mom told me to send her checkbooks in the mail that belonged to my grandmother. My mom didn't live with us and she told me that my grandmother had asked me to send them since she was out of town. So I did. I later got sat down by my grandmother and she was furious with me for sending the books. My mother had apparently done this in order to commit fraud and had drained my grandmother's life savings from close to $1 million down to nothing. I got blamed for it until my grandmother passed away. One of her last conversations with me at age 24 was her still expressing her disappointment in me for sending the books. My mother denies the whole thing to this day. I was about 9. There was a performance at the school. I was in the choir. My dad dropped me off and picked me up afterwards. When I was picked up, I found out I was in huge trouble. He absolutely unleashed on me. Closed fist, kicked me, threw me against the wall, broke furniture. Grown man strength versus a 9-year-old. Jeez. To this day I remember just curling up in a ball and him wailing on me. For weeks I had no idea what I had done. My offense. My shirt was untucked when he picked me up. To him it meant I was running around raising heck while unsupervised. Actually, it was the choir's costume. We were farm people singing tunes from Oklahoma. Jesus Christ. That's a bull's reason for him to beat you the frick up. He must have been drunk or something. My mom aggressively forced a bear hug a foster kid who'd been repeatedly violated by her father while her mom held her down. So, my mom is a boundary stomper extraordinaire and abused me all throughout my childhood. I eventually wound up in foster care myself and haven't spoken to her in years. But remembering this, it was the most cruel thing I ever saw her do to anyone who wasn't me. My relatives had a foster daughter who, as I said above, had been violated by her dad while her mom held her down. My mother knew this. My relatives made the mistake of inviting my mother over, and my mom said, "Welcome to the family, gimme a hug." To the girl, who said no. My relatives said no. My mother kept saying, "But why? Why not? Come on, it's just a hug." I tried to pull my mom aside to explain why this was a bad idea, even though it should have been obvious, because neither I nor my relatives wanted to just blurt out, because she's traumatized by hugs and touches after being violated so much, obviously, right in front of the girl. So then my mom just hurried over to the girl and grabbed her in a big bear hug and wouldn't let go while the girl tried to push her off plus hyperventilated. To my shame, and the shame of my relatives, we all just stood there for a moment in stunned silence before running over and removing my mother from the girl, who was now crying. The girl ran off to her bedroom. My relatives, the foster parents, told my mom to get out. Then my mom dragged me off to the car and yelled at me for a while. Finally, when I could get a word in, I explained to my mother why the hug was so wrong and hurtful. I explained that my mom should have taken context into account. My mom, the girl is fricked up in the head if she can't even take a hug from somebody nice. And she's probably lying about her parents anyway. God, I'm still mad remembering it. Holy Lord, I hate how people like that can be so delusional. Most of my friends avoided coming to my front door. My dad was scary crap. One of my good guy friends, however, was so mellow and unfazed by literally anything. He would knock on the door as opposed to my window. He was around 6 feet 5 inches and goofy looking. So, he decided to dye his hair bright manic panic green, and his eyebrows. It was raining out. He knocked on our front door and my dad opened it. He stared, silently, for nearly a minute, taking in the full effect of my giant green buddy whose skin was now quite green too. My dad was really stoned, as opposed to the more typical less mellow things he usually went for. Finally, he just came and got me and said, "Underpants bandit, there's a jolly green giant here to see you," and left the room. The next day he asked if, in fact, my buddy was actually the jolly green giant or if he was hallucinating. I was waiting for a funny one to finish reading. This made me laugh just the right amount. Thanks for sharing, buddy. My sister and I had a bed in my mother's room. She slept with her boyfriend on that bed. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw them freaking. Another time, I had woken up and gone downstairs, asked her boyfriend, the same one from earlier, where my mother was. He lifted up his chin and there was a cut all the way across his neck. I later found out that my mom went to jail for 27 days. I've also seen my mom going after my current stepfather with a knife. Good thing we had a roommate. When I was 21, I flew to Australia to live for 2 years. About 8 months into my stay, my father admitted to me that he had been working under my name and SIN number, working at a job that prior to his employment, needed to do a credit check. He didn't have good credit, so apparently he had got my SIN number and other documents prior to me leaving and took photos. I think it was probably sitting in a chair with a wooden spoon when I was about 5, screaming at me to come to her so she could beat me with it. The kind of scream where they turn red in the face. Their expression is so distorted it barely looks human. Their throat gets so tight from the level of screaming they sound different. I just remember standing there in front of her crying and frozen. When I didn't go to her, she started hitting herself with the wooden spoon on her leg, screaming as she did it. When it snapped in half on her leg, she started hitting herself and pulling at her own hair. She had a wooden spoon-shaped bruise perfectly shaped out on her leg, and I remember a few days later when I saw it and said something, she said, "That's because of you. That's what you did." I'm pretty sure it was because I didn't want her to brush my hair. I can't really remember. My brother never experienced any of this. I always copped it when I was home alone with her. But out of everything she ever said to me, and still does, that was the most fricked thing I've seen her do. Ah man, bless you. I hope you have a peaceful life now. My dad was a rager. My ex was a rager. My so is the sweetest, calmest man. You don't realize the pain of yelling until it's gone. Mum threatened to shoot herself over the new dog crapping on the carpet. She's a very all or nothing woman. Her sound for "I am struggling with the peanut butter jar" is the same as her sound for "someone is currently being murdered." Might have to do with the depression and anxiety that she passed on to me. My parents are the same, OMG. My stepfather groping my girlfriend's breasts. I complained, but my mother told me not to be so jealous. They might as well have given me a brochure of headstones, saying they've decided to both be dead to me. They might as well have given me a brochure of headstones, saying they've decided to both be dead to me. Yep, I would have to agree with you on that one. That's a serious case of wait, what? Oh frick no, I'm outta here. My stepdad threatened to kick me and my sister out of the house along with all do our stuff if my mom left on a business trip that would secure her job and make her self-dependent. I told her to leave because it was important that she go and do this for herself. He indeed kicked us out after I came back from the airport. He took the ski rack he helped buy off the car and moved all of the furniture, throwing anything in a public space or their room into the garage or my sister's room. I began secretly loading the car with essentials like our personal files and birth certificates. I also grabbed the PS4 he bought me to prevent him from abusing my account. My puppy was still on worms treatments, but he said he would take her back if we left her, so we had to put her in her crate where she had bad diarrhea. I took essential clothes and school stuff and tried to take my violin. However, he spotted me when I went to head downstairs and ran in front of me. I had paid for half of the $1,500 instrument, but he helped pay for the rest and claimed it was his. I tried to keep it from him, which became a wrestling match between my 5'4", 117 pound self and his 220 pound 6 featuring self. He eventually reached past me and grabbed the strap, ripping the handle I was holding off of the case. We left shortly after, seeking refuge at neighbors for 3 days. I had to hide my car in a parking lot a ways away so he wouldn't try to steal it. I did eventually get the violin back, but he destroyed our house and put a 3-inch radius hole in the stairway wall, and kicked and punched the bathroom door in my mom's room, destroying it and ripping it off the hinges. I have never been so terrified of a guardian before. She got divorced from him a month later. TLDR, my stepdad kicked me and my sis out of the house, taking a lot of our stuff, while my mom was out of town. At least her mom is away from him now, and BTW that is some weird stuff. My parents go in an argument, like I'm sure a lot of couples do, but it just kept escalating, voices raising. Eventually it ended up in screaming match. My mom took the phone off the hook and threw it at my dad. He caught it just before it hit his face and then he got right in my mom's face and screamed at her. She then started smacking him and screaming at him. At the time I thought that was how couples argued. Then I saw my wife's parents get in an argument. She said it was one of the worst she had ever seen, and they were barely 1/10th of the yelling my parents had gotten. Anyway, this has led to a lot of issues with my wife. She thinks I'm yelling at her when I'm, in my mind, barely raising my voice. She always thought I was crossing a line, while I thought I was holding back. Then about 6 months ago she saw my mom and I get in a fight. I'm not even sure what it was over, but I had to resort to yelling to get my point across and catching random crap she threw at me. After that my wife understood that when I get stern and don't yell, and don't throw crap, I'm holding back. I'm trying the hardest to not end up like my mom. My parents divorced when I was 7. My father died when I was in my early 20s. He left me $5 in his will. That was fine. I wanted nothing to do with him from the time I was 7. The courts revoked his visitation when I was 13. I saw him 3 times from a distance between 13 and 18 and didn't speak to him. We never got in contact again. My mom wanted me to get a lawyer, contest his will and turn over the money to her because she felt she was due on account of her crappy marriage and lousy divorce settlement. Her sisters agreed. Leaving a token amount means I didn't forget this person exists. I just don't want them to have anything so they can't contest the will saying they were accidentally left out or something. My dad has very bad road rage. When I was about 8 he got us into an accident on purpose just to get back at the person for getting into the turning lane in front of the neighborhood he was trying to get out of. My dad swerved in front of traffic and hit the guy from behind. I still hate being in the car with him. My mum cheated on my dad when I was 5 yo. I remember seeing the guy and mum saying don't tell dad. To save the marriage they moved states and my dad still kept his same job, $150k salary in the 90s, and came home in the weekends. Of course mum found someone else to cheat with while dad was at work. He got her all the new cars and started her a business. But still she was committed to cheating. They divorced. During the custody court case she lied in court say my dad violated me and my sister. Same mum, different dad. My dad was trying to get custody of my sister even though she wasn't his own. He knew she was better off with him. The case destroyed my dad, lost his job, house money etc. Mum remarried and had more kids with the new guy. Fast forward 10 years, and she cheats on him with his best friend. Told my sisters don't tell dad. She broke the news on my birthday which was the same day as my final exams. They go to court for custody. Can you guess what happens next? She said my stepdad raped her and my sisters. Utter balls. He can only visit with a police officer present. These are examples of what she has done to people in my life. I could write a book about the crap she has done to me personally. Welp. When I was about 10 me and my aunt, 2 cousins and my mom went to this water park. My older cousin had gone off with her friend and me, my mom and my younger cousin went to go on a ride and my aunt was sitting by the wave pool. When me, my mom, and younger cousin got to the slide he got scared. He told my mom that he wanted to go back to his mom. My mom then started going ballistic on him and cussing at him and crap and that scared him even more so he ran off to his mom. Well my mom grabbed me and we went to find him. We found him with my aunt and without her saying anything my mom then started cussing her out and threatening her, saying that my cousin was a little p and she was gonna kill her because he ran away. That just scared him even more and he started crying. We got kicked out the park, and the whole 45-minute ride home she was just talking more crap. After that my mom cut my aunt off. It's been 9 years and they still haven't talked. Your mom's a C. When I was in 3rd maybe 4th grade, I was crying in my room on the bed because my mom wouldn't let me go to a neighbor's house. She then proceeded to take a pillow from my bed and hold it over my face, attempting to suffocate me. Luckily, I was smart enough to hold my arms over my face to keep her from doing it. I still hate her for that till this day and I'm 16. She wonders why I don't love her the way I do my dad. What the actual frick? I have really low blood pressure and high anxiety stress. This was also when I was struggling with an eating disorder and hardly ate anything. I got into an argument with my mother about something incredibly stupid, probably about how I left a crumb on the counter when I wiped it down or something, and started telling my mother I felt faint and was struggling to stand. My mom screamed at me to leave her room and get ready for school. I left her room and promptly fainted, hitting my head on the corner of a wall and knocking myself out cold. When I woke up minutes later I couldn't move my legs or my arms and began screaming for my mom to help me, sobbing loudly and begging for her to help. My mom opened the door, looked down at my crying, begging body unable to move on the floor, and said "You're always so freaking dramatic," before slamming the door in my face. I had a severe concussion. That's awful. I'm sorry you had to go through that. My mother loved to use dramatic, especially when it came to genuine health or mental concerns. I hope you're doing okay now, X. My father strapped fireworks to me at a family barbecue and recorded me as I ran around, frantically screaming whilst trying to remove them as my entire extended family cheered and hooted with laughter. My mom and dad have been divorced since I was 1, and despite the fact that I spent approximately an equal amount of time with each of them through my childhood, my mother's house was my legal residence, so I went to school in the town she lived in. During my 8th grade year, I began living with my dad full-time due to years of abuse and neglect by my mom. That following summer my mother moved without telling anyone, leaving me and my dad to either move to the town where my mom lived, which had a great school system and all my friends, or stay where we lived, in the most drug-infested town in the county with a considerably worse school system. My dad and I had to find a place and move in less than 2 months. My father held my mother down and screamed in her face because she didn't pay a bill, threw her backwards into a glass door because he thought she was cheating, shoved me through drywall because I clenched my fist while I was being yelled at, swung at me for trying to leave during an argument, kicked me out repeatedly throughout my entire childhood. My mom stays with him, still. She acts as if he is the perfect human being. Maybe he has changed, but I still don't trust him. Not my story but my husband's. At 6 years old he had a loving relationship with his dog Star. The stories he's told me about her really light up his eyes. He loved her so much, but Star was getting old and he could tell. There had been some talks of taking her to the vet to be euthanized, but nothing ever came of it. One day he heard a scuffle in the shed and peeked his head around the corner of the door only to see his mother hanging his dog from a beam. This is always the story that kills the lights in his eyes when he talks about her. I'm big into rescuing and fostering dogs, so this story really tears me up every dang time. Of all the fricked up ways to kill a dog, you would think that somebody with a barn would have a gun to put it out of its misery right away, but hanging the poor thing, I can just picture it. My condolences to your husband. Watched my stepfather hold a gun to my mother's head telling her he'd kill her while he had her pinned on the floor. It's not a great experience calling 911 at 13 years old. They decided to have kinky fricking in a small hotel room while me and my baby brother were in the same room. That is messed up, holy crap. Saw my dad kill a dog with a hose because he was always fighting with the other dog. Saw him drown a cat in a 5-gallon bucket, not sure why, and saw him possibly beat a person to death. I was young, around 8, and he stopped at a bar and fought a guy right out front with me sitting in the car. He got the guy on the ground and just kept pounding his face until he wasn't moving. Got back in the car with blood all over him and his hands all messed up. We went to my grandparents' house right after, then stayed at one of his friend's house for about a week, then moved far away from that state. He told me later in life that it was a random guy that just tried to jump him and he just defended himself. He also very seriously told me that I can never go back to that state. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.